welcome to this episode of Vantage Point here on News First with me, Shaheen Rampati, where we will be discussing a wide range of politics and events inside and outside Sri Lanka. Well, over the past 2 weeks, we've had two major rallies which were held at the heart of Colombo, a historic visit by US President Barack Obama to Cuba, and two devastating terrorist attacks in Brussels, Belgium and Lahore, Pakistan. Well, to discuss these matters in detail, we are joined by political analyst and former diplomat, Dr. Diane Jayatilaka. Dr. Jayatilaka, welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to speak to you.
Hi, Shaheen.
Dr. Jayatilaka, first things first. Sri Lanka's current political spectrum. Would you say there's a certain element of row, dispute, chaos, pandemonium among political parties in Sri Lanka, or as a matter of fact, within certain political parties, particularly the Sri Lanka Freedom Party?
Yes, I would, and I would say that it's sad and it's needless. I say it's sad because Sri Lanka had a two-party system even before India, and a two-party system is seen as a prerequisite for liberal democracy. India had the dominance of one party until 1977, but Sri Lanka had a two-party system at least from 1956. Now we don't, because the main center-left opposition is divided. The official Sri Lanka Freedom Party is in coalition with the center-right UNP, which means there really is no recognized opposition. What you have is the TNA, which has only 16 seats. You have the JVP, which holds the position of the chief whip of the opposition with 5 or 6 seats. And you have 51 MPs belonging to a formation called the joint opposition. So they are numerically much larger than the officially recognized opposition. That's an anomaly. So there's a proliferation of anomalies. There's no two-party system anymore. The center-left SLFP, which has always been anti-UNP from its inception in 1965, 1951, 65 years ago, is now officially in coalition with its main rival, the UNP. And the numerically largest segment of the opposition is not recognized as the official opposition. Therefore, you have a very strange situation. It's in this strange situation that all of these dynamics of, as you say, row and turmoil are taking place. It's because somebody changed the goalposts. The game has changed. The game is working well.
Dr. Jayatilaka, while some agree that the cause for the prevalent situation, as you said, is the non-existence of a powerful opposition. So
no, it exists. It's not recognized as such.
Yes, all right. The cause could also be attributed to the joint opposition that you mentioned, comprising of 51 members. It's a bit of a back and forth situation, don't you think?
No, because, I would have gone along with that, with your criticism, if there had been a clear answer to a very, very simple question. And that question is, isn't there supposed to be an opposition to the UNP government? Now, if there is supposed to be an opposition to the UNP, if it's a good thing to have an opposition to the UNP government or to an SLFP government, if you need a mainstream opposition in a democracy, why not recognize the joint opposition as that opposition? Now, the joint opposition can be criticized only if you think that there should not be a democratic opposition to the UNP government. Because if not for the joint opposition, you would just have the SLFP dragged along by its leadership into a coalition government with the UNP. And there wouldn't be an opposition, there'd only be the TNA and the JVP. Is that real? That's completely crazy. In 1977, the TULF was the main opposition, but that's because they got more seats than the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. That was fine. It created problems, but it was logical. Here, is not logical. You have 16 TNA MPs and they are supposed to be the official opposition. Now, if you think that there has to be a democratic national opposition to the UNP government, then there's nothing wrong with the joint opposition. One should welcome its existence. It lends an equilibrium to the system. What's wrong is not the joint opposition. What's wrong is that the joint opposition, which has demonstrated its strong existence and capacity, is not recognized as the main parliamentary opposition, which, factually speaking, it is.
Dr. Jathan, let's talk about the two major rallies the United National Party held, and then 2 days later the joint opposition held. What is your perception of that?
Well, it wasn't two major rallies because the UNP planned to have a rally in Hyde Park but couldn't. It had a rally open air around Lipton Circus. Now, Lipton Circus is where white-collar trade unions used to picket. That's not a place you have a rally. You have a rally in Lipton Circus only. You can't have a rally in a park. So it was a very poor rally. And Prime Minister Vikram Singh was in the crowd with his arms folded, with a smile pasted on his face, half smile, but not saying a word. Now, by contrast, you had the joint opposition rally, which was very, very big. I mean, I've been for rallies at Hyde Park as a boy with my dad from the 60s. I was also, as a schoolboy, at the giant JVP rally addressed by Rohan Vijayveera just before the April 1971 insurrection. Now, we know that whatever the JVP is not capable of doing is good at mobilizing people for public meetings. And they had this big rally in Hyde Park. Vijayveera was, I still remember, I must have been in middle school, was in a red turtleneck, and he demonstrated some karate moves. Now, that giant JVP rally was probably 1/10 the size of the joint opposition rally on March 17th at Hyde Park. After that rally, I was invited to be on the platform, so my wife and I were on the platform, just as we were at Nugegoda, so I had the view of the crowd. But it can be misleading when you're on a platform. But what happened after that was that we went over to Barefoot for an exhibition of paintings by some very interesting young artists, including a Croatian, Branka Ridiki. And there we met at the cocktails a European, an Eastern European gentleman, who lived in one of the luxury high-rises from which you can see Hyde Park. And we were discussing this, and I said, we came over from over there, it looked pretty big and so on. And he said, you want to know how big it really was? I'll show you. And he fished out his camera phone. Now, he's not into Sri Lankan politics. He's certainly not a Mahinda Rajapaksa fan, he's a European. He showed us on his camera phone. He said, look at this crowd. From his high-rise apartment, he had shots of the crowd at different times. And it was a dense crowd from the Odell roundabout, Shaheen. That's pretty big. It's from the Odell roundabout into the park, overflowing the park, and up Union Place itself. It was huge. Now, it doesn't mean that the joint opposition can topple the government and come to power or something. What it means is that it's a pretty strong opposition, and that's a reality that should be recognized.
Dr. Jathan, as mighty or not so mighty as you say these two rallies were, several factions in Colombo were very much inconvenienced by these two rallies, and within a span of 3 days, as a matter of fact. So these two rallies being held at peak hours during rush hour, during weekdays, do you think it's a give and take situation, as in with the mindset, well, you can't please everyone because there was much traffic congestion here?
Well, I was watching your station. I watch your station. And correct me if I'm wrong, Shaheen, but there were more people criticizing the government's rally, the mobilization, than they were criticizing Hyde Park. And I think the reason is that there were more buses that came in, and there was a march as well. The UNP had a march, and that snarled up traffic a lot more than Hyde Park, because Hyde Park was well advertised. People kind of knew to steer clear of Hyde Park itself. So even on your station, fewer commuters were critical of the Hyde Park meeting on camera. That's interesting.
Well, that being said, a much criticized move by the joint opposition is the ritual of smashing coconuts. Do you really believe that a government can be toppled with a bunch of coconuts?
Well, I mean, politics isn't exactly a coconut shy. And I don't go within 100 miles of anybody smashing coconuts. But as a social scientist, I'm familiar with a certain term. That term is primary forms of nationalist resistance. That's a category. Now, according to the social science literature, the primary form, not the sophisticated forms, there are many forms of nationalist resistance, but the primary forms of nationalist resistance are cultural. That is, they use cultural practices, sometimes even sorcery. These are popular beliefs. So these forms are used, and they've always been used in Sri Lanka against President Premadasa's administration and so on. These are the primary cultural forms of nationalist resistance that's written about in social science literature everywhere in the world. They use popular ritual as a form of protest. So that's where it comes from. It's not new to either Sri Lanka or to the third world. I give it a wide berth, but it's not unusual.
Since Dr. Jayatilaka, you seem to be much closer to the joint opposition.
Well, I'm sympathetic.
Former President Rajapaksa, in fact.
Well, I balance between, I'd like to say this openly, I have my sympathies for President Rajapaksa, but I see myself as being non-aligned between President Rajapaksa and President Sirisena. I'm not equidistant, but I'm not aligned between them. I am, however, opposed to the policies of Prime Minister Vikram Singh and Foreign Minister Mangala Samaravira and former President Chandrika Kumaratunga. I'm opposed to those. I'm not balancing there, but I am non-aligned. I see myself as non-aligned. I'm not a member of the joint opposition. I'm in sympathy with them, but I would say I'm non-aligned between this President Sirisena, whom I think, I think he's a good man. He's helpful to the country. He's a reformist. We need those reforms. He's saying things that former President Rajapaksa didn't but should have. But I also respect President Mahinda Rajapaksa, so I'm kind of non-aligned between those two.
Dr. Jayatilaka, now the joint opposition's quote-unquote conduct has certainly angered the SLFP Central Committee and its other party members loyal to President Sirisena. And now recent developments say that there's going to be a disciplinary inquiry against certain SLFP members who did attend the joint opposition rally. What is your take on that?
Well, I don't think they're angered at all, because there's no disciplinary action taken. The new General Secretary of the UPFA, Mr. Amaravira, has said that there's no need for disciplinary action because the rally was not against President Sirisena or the SLFP. It was against the UNP. So the only person I know who was angered and who said, let's see what happens, all of these people are going to have disciplinary action taken against them, was former President Madam Kumaratunga. Now, Madam Kumaratunga is not an elected MP. That's just her personal point of view. And she was the only one who sounded angry. Nobody else sounded angry. And the SLFP doesn't look like it's going to take any disciplinary action at the moment, because it's very clear that if they do, they're going to lose quite a bit of their own strength.
So where does President Sirisena stand amidst all this turmoil or chaos?
Well, I think President Sirisena is under threat, not so much from Mahinda Rajapaksa, because Mahinda Rajapaksa and he are rivals, they are competing for the SLFP. But one of the reasons that President Sirisena is under siege in the SLFP is that he doesn't seem to have much power over the UNP in government. Mahinda Rajapaksa and the joint opposition are thriving because of the policies of the UNP. If the UNP policies were popular, I mean this is the first year of the government, if the UNP policies were popular, then there would be no place for the joint opposition because President Sirisena is also the leader of the SLFP. Going by the textbook, there shouldn't be a joint opposition because President Sirisena is the leader of the country and the SLFP should be clustered around him, but they're not. They're not because he has not cracked the whip on the UNP government. If he did so, the SLFP would be happy, it would be unified, and there wouldn't be anything for Mahinda Rajapaksa to complain about, except his own, the cases.
Dr. Jayathilakan, just to quickly touch on a statement former President Rajapaksa made. He made a pretty interesting statement which appalled a lot of opposing as well as his own members. He said, if you can't run the country, just give it to me. And then that has come under criticism or scrutiny, say, you have the country for 10 years, and now you're saying if you can't run the country, give it back to me. What does his statement imply?
Well, I was on the platform when he said that. And his point was, look, this is what I did when I ran the country. He was talking about the economy. And he said, these guys can't manage it, and look how they're in crisis. They say they're in crisis. We weren't in crisis when I was in office. Obviously, these guys don't know how to run the place. And, if you can't do it, give it back. Now, that's a typical rhetorical flourish of a politician. Any politician who's making a comeback, such as former President Nicolas Sarkozy, says that kind of thing. I mean, look, you guys are messing up. I did it better. If you can't do it better, give it back to me. That's a rhetorical flourish. But how can he get it back unless there's an election? And there isn't an election for the next 4 years. So it's a legitimate rhetorical flourish because that's what every politician says when they make a comeback. They say, look, we did it better. Now, the more important thing I think that he said was before that statement, when he said, you can jail my sons. One guy, Yoshita, he was there for whatever number of days. Mahinda Rajapaksa said, I told him that's nothing. I spent 3 months in jail under the UNP. What he didn't say was that he had to go for his own mother's funeral in handcuffs. There are photographs of it. This was under President Javadana and with the present Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe playing a significant role in that. So he said, I told my boy, you can take it. I did 3 months in jail. And then he said, now we'll take Nama. And he looked around. And I looked around because Nama was standing at the back of the stage. And Mahinda looked around and said, he's very young. I did 3 months, he can do twice as much. I think there's no problem. Let him spend 6 months in jail. Right? And he said, look, you can arrest my family, you can arrest me, you can lock me up. Nobody can drive me out of politics. Now he got a huge cheer for that. It was a much bigger cheer than the one about giving the country back. I think that is the main message. The message is there is no pressure that can be brought on him that is going to succeed in driving him out of politics. And there are enough people out there as Hyde Park showed and as the SLFP meetings around the country now show, enough people for that not to be an empty boast. It's not going to be just him in whatever home he has saying, I'm not going to be driven out of politics, like and sitting there like old King Cole. No, he's got a mass movement with him. Now, I don't think that's enough for him to come back to office unless he's very smart, makes a self-criticism, does some rethinking, and runs for office 4 years from now, which he can because he looks very healthy and fit. But right now, what's sure is that he can't be intimidated, and he can't be silenced, and he cannot be driven out of politics. I think he's made that point, and that was the most important point he made.
Dr. Jadilaka, for a moment, quickly, let's wipe our smiles off our faces for a moment, and let's talk about Brussels and Lahore.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
In Brussels, 31 people were killed and a couple of hundred people were injured. At the same time, a week later, on Easter Sunday, Lahore was attacked, 700 people dead and 300 people injured. I think this goes way back to a discussion in terms of Paris and somewhere else. There's a sense of inequality here again, I see. I don't know if you agree or not. I mean, yes, lives do matter, but does not the lives in Lahore matter too?
Well, they do, Shaheen. Unfortunately, the media, the world media, which is dominated by the Western media, is far more sensitive to the lives of those in the first world than those in the third world. But we went through 30 years of this. And when you watch the television, you realize what a big deal it is that we defeated terrorism. It's not easy. Even the Pakistani army, which is a very strong army, has not been able to do so, not because it's a bad army, but because the political will doesn't seem to exist. We were lucky, we got lucky that in that we finally had a political leadership that had the will and the clarity to win in 2.5 years a war that we hadn't won for 30. That gives us the peace and normalcy that we now have, but for 30 years we went through this. And we couldn't come to the studios because we didn't know, because there could have been a bomb, and there were bombs. Your colleagues, I knew your colleagues at that time, wonderful young lady, Minna Fernandez, I think, who reported on the Colonava oil refinery blast. I mean, this office, people like you, in an earlier generation, you were having to report on all the carnage that was taking place. The news was full of footage from the National Hospital here. And we are out of that because we defeated terrorism, and that's why I am totally opposed to cooperation with any resolution that says that we are going to bring in foreigners who weren't here to fight for us when we were dying. Bring in foreigners as experts or as prosecutors or as judges and try the Sri Lankan armed forces and the political leadership that liberated us from the fate that we see societies still falling victim to, from Paris to Brussels to Lahore.
Dr. Jadilaka, I would love to talk to you about this matter for hours and days, but sadly we're out of time, and thank you very much for joining us on the show. That's Vantage Point here on Newsfirst on TV1. Dr. Jadilaka, thank you very much for joining us on the show. I'm Shaheen Rampati. Good night.